Heavy fighting continues along the Zaporizhia front in southern Ukraine, an area that Russia has long described as a fortified defensive line. According to reports from the battlefield, the region has become one of the most intense zones of combat in the war, with more than 50 clashes recorded daily across the Zaporizhia Oblast. Ukrainian and Russian forces are engaged in continuous fighting, while drones conduct constant reconnaissance and attack missions above the battlefield. Missile units and artillery batteries fire almost without interruption, and armored vehicles continue to move across the open steppe terrain. The area that Moscow once presented as an impenetrable defensive wall has now turned into a landscape of smoke, destruction, and rapidly shifting control. Recent developments indicate that the strategic situation in the region has changed significantly over the past several weeks. Ukrainian forces have reportedly regained control of a large territory and several settlements, forcing Russian units to withdraw from an area estimated at around 400 square kilometers. Military analysts describe the retreat as one of the largest tactical withdrawals by Russian forces in the region since the beginning of the war. Russian troops have been seen moving missile batteries, ammunition depots, and command centers farther away from the immediate combat zone as Ukrainian pressure increases. The Zaporizhia front is considered one of the most important sectors of the war because it connects several operational directions and supply routes. The region lies at a critical crossroads linking the areas of Dnipropetrovsk, Zaporizhia, and Donetsk. Control over this intersection has strategic implications for both sides, influencing the movement of troops, logistics, and heavy equipment. According to available assessments, between 50,000 and 70,000 Russian troops are deployed in and around the Zaporizhia sector. Despite this large concentration of forces, Ukrainian operations in recent days have succeeded in destabilizing the Russian defensive structure. The situation escalated rapidly following a Ukrainian counterattack launched during the last 72 hours. Ukrainian units reportedly carried out a coordinated ambush operation targeting Russian logistics and supply routes near the key intersection of the three regions. Reports indicate that several Russian ammunition storage facilities exploded one after another, while missile launch systems were rendered ineffective due to damage or disruption of supply chains. The attack significantly affected Russian logistical capabilities in the sector, creating confusion among frontline units and weakening the operational coordination of Russian forces. Military observers say the turning point occurred within a very short period of time. In less than 24 hours, Ukrainian special units moved into action in the smoky battlefield environment of Zaporizhia. One of the units involved in the operation was an elite Ukrainian formation identified as the Artan unit. According to information emerging from the front, the operation was designed not as a standard infantry assault, but as a targeted effort to dismantle Russian defensive tactics based on static positions and heavy manpower deployment. Initially, Russian commanders attempted to hold their defensive line by sending large numbers of soldiers toward a contested area near Stepnoyarsk. However, Ukrainian special forces reportedly began systematically targeting the logistical arteries supporting those positions. Supply routes were cut, one after another, through precision fire, causing Russian defensive lines to collapse rapidly. Communications nodes used by Russian units in the region were also disrupted, leaving some formations without clear coordination or instructions. Dozens of Russian soldiers were reportedly neutralized during the fighting before they fully understood the scale of the attack. Armored vehicles belonging to the Ukrainian unit played a key role during the operation. Buildings and trenches previously occupied by Russian troops were turned into firing positions, allowing Ukrainian forces to establish control over several strategic points. The ability to dominate supply routes proved decisive. Commanders involved in the operation emphasized that cutting logistical connections can render even a large army ineffective within its own combat zone. According to the reported commander of the operation, Viktor Torkotuk, known by the call sign Titan, the key element of the plan was to destroy the enemy's logistical arteries with concentrated fire. He stated that once the supply routes were disrupted, the efficiency of Russian assault units dropped to nearly zero. Military analysts say this approach directly targeted the structural weaknesses of Russian forces operating in the region. The impact of these developments has been significant. Ukrainian troops were able to advance several kilometers into contested territory after Russian positions began to collapse. At the same time, the battlefield in Zaporizhia remains highly unstable. Both sides continue to reinforce their positions, and intense fighting persists across multiple directions. Western military analysts are closely monitoring the situation. Some experts describe the rapid Ukrainian gains as unexpected, while Ukrainian soldiers on the ground say the operation is the result of months of planning and preparation. The area of 400 square kilometers now regained by Ukrainian forces is seen not only as a territorial gain, but also as a symbolic blow to the image of Russian military invincibility that Moscow has promoted since the beginning of the war. Despite these developments, the conflict in the region remains far from settled. Russian forces still maintain a significant presence in the wider Zaporizhia sector, and additional reserves may be moved into the area. As the fighting intensifies, the strategic consequences of this shift on the southern front are only beginning to emerge. The escalation on the Zaporizhia front continued with a second phase of Ukrainian operations that introduced new battlefield technology and tactics. Ukrainian military sources report that units of the 3rd Assault Brigade, which traces its lineage to the Azov formation, launched what was described as Operation Samurai. The operation focused on the use of small, unmanned ground vehicles designed to carry explosive payloads directly into Russian positions and ammunition depots. These robotic systems, sometimes compared in appearance to household robot devices due to their compact shape and mobility, were deployed in coordinated attacks against Russian logistics infrastructure. According to available reports, operators controlling these ground robots were positioned at a safe distance while guiding the machines toward predetermined targets. Russian forces quickly attempted to stop the advancing devices using a variety of countermeasures. Reports indicate that Russian units deployed several FPV drones, carried out airstrikes, and used artillery batteries in an attempt to neutralize the robotic systems before they reached their targets. Despite these efforts, the unmanned vehicles reportedly continued to move toward Russian positions, creating confusion among defending troops who were uncertain how to stop them effectively. The cost imbalance between the weapons used in the encounter became one of the most notable aspects of the operation. Russian forces reportedly used large amounts of ammunition and high-value systems in an attempt to destroy machines that cost only a fraction of the price. Even with this response, several of the robotic devices reportedly reached their designated targets. When the explosions occurred, Russian ammunition depots containing millions of dollars worth of munitions were destroyed. Analysts say the destruction of these depots not only caused immediate damage, but also further weakened Russian supply chains already under pressure from Ukrainian strikes. The psychological effect on the battlefield was also significant. Soldiers stationed at Russian defensive positions reportedly faced a new type of threat approaching from the ground, while drones remained active in the air above them. Ukrainian operators from the NC-13 unit of the Assault Brigade reportedly described the operation as both a tactical strike and a signal to Russian forces that their supply stockpiles could be targeted at any time. The combination of drones, artillery strikes, and unmanned ground vehicles created a layered attack environment that Russian units struggled to counter quickly. Military observers say that this type of technological adaptation has become a defining feature of the conflict. Modern battlefield systems increasingly combine reconnaissance drones, precision artillery, and autonomous or semi-autonomous machines. Ukrainian forces appear to be integrating these elements into coordinated attacks designed to weaken Russian logistics before attempting territorial advances. The destruction of ammunition depots also contributed to broader problems already reported inside Russian units operating in the Zaporizhia region. According to estimates mentioned in the reports, Russian losses in the area have reached extremely high levels over time. Figures circulating in military analysis suggest that Russian forces may be losing an average of approximately 26,000 soldiers per month across various sectors of the war. While these figures remain difficult to verify independently, they are frequently cited by analysts examining the intensity of combat in the region. The battlefield setbacks have also affected several specific Russian formations. Reports indicate that even elite units, including the Russian 7th Airborne Division, were forced to withdraw from positions near the center of the fighting around Stepnoyarsk after sustaining heavy losses. The retreat of such formations highlights the intensity of the Ukrainian pressure on the front line and suggests that even well-trained units have struggled to maintain defensive positions under the current conditions. Analysts studying the situation have pointed to two key factors behind the rapid deterioration of Russian defenses in the area. The first is the impact of Ukrainian special operations that targeted communication centers and supply routes. The second factor involves reported disruptions in communication channels used by Russian forces. Data referenced by the Institute for the Study of War indicates that technical and communication problems have played a role in weakening coordination between Russian units on the ground. Reports mention disruptions linked to communication systems such as Starlink outages and restrictions on certain messaging channels previously used for coordination. In a combat environment where units rely heavily on real-time information, the inability to receive orders or locate nearby Allied units can significantly reduce effectiveness. Military analysts say that such breakdowns can transform an already chaotic battlefield into an environment where units operate with limited situational awareness. Ukrainian forces appear to have used this disruption to their advantage. While Russian troops in some sectors have advanced only dozens of meters per day, Ukrainian units have reportedly managed to reclaim several kilometers of territory during rapid movements following logistical strikes. Analysts say this difference reflects a shift in operational tempo, driven by new technologies and more flexible tactics. The contrast between the two sides' battlefield approaches has also been widely discussed. Russian tactics in several areas still rely on large infantry assaults, sometimes described as human wave attacks, a method associated with earlier periods of warfare. However, on a modern battlefield filled with reconnaissance drones, precision strikes, and fiber optic-controlled FPV drones, such assaults can lead to extremely high casualties. Despite the setbacks, Russian officials continue to insist that the country possesses large manpower reserves capable of replacing losses. Public statements by Russian Security Council Deputy Chairman Dmitry Medvedev previously claimed that more than 400,000 new recruits had joined the military. Analysts examining the Zaporizhia front, however, say the reality on the battlefield may be more complex. Available data indicates that Russia's total military losses since the beginning of the war are approaching 1 million personnel when combining killed and wounded estimates cited by various sources. These losses place increasing pressure on recruitment systems and the ability to train and equip new soldiers before sending them to the front line. As Ukrainian forces continue their offensive actions in the region, the question of whether Russia can stabilize the Zaporizhia front remains open. Reports indicate that Russian command is attempting to move additional reserves toward the sector. However, some of these units are described as poorly trained or inadequately equipped, raising concerns among analysts about their ability to reverse the current momentum of the fighting. For now, the Zaporizhia battlefield remains one of the most dynamic and unpredictable areas of the war. The introduction of robotic systems, the destruction of supply depots, and the disruption of communication networks have combined to create a rapidly changing operational environment. The coming weeks are expected to determine whether Ukrainian advances in the region can be consolidated, or whether Russian reinforcements will succeed in stabilizing the front line. Beyond the immediate battlefield developments, the situation in the Zaporizhia region is producing broader strategic consequences that are now being closely monitored by military analysts and international institutions. Ukrainian advances across approximately 400 square kilometers of territory have not only changed the tactical balance on the ground, but have also raised new questions about the future direction of the war in southern Ukraine. Analysts note that this sector has long been central to Russia's effort to maintain a land corridor connecting its occupied territories to Crimea, making any loss of control in this area particularly significant. Reports from the front indicate that Russian forces have been forced to move several key systems farther away from the line of contact. Missile launchers, artillery positions, and ammunition depots have reportedly been relocated deeper inside the Zaporizhia region to reduce their exposure to Ukrainian strikes. This repositioning has immediate operational consequences because it increases the distance between Russian artillery units and Ukrainian targets. As a result, some areas previously under frequent shelling may now be beyond the effective range of Russian fire. At the same time, the withdrawal of these systems reduces Russia's ability to provide rapid-fire support to frontline units. Analysts say that this loss of range advantage could weaken Russian defensive capabilities if Ukrainian forces continue their advance. Modern Ukrainian long-range drones have increasingly been used to strike logistical facilities and military infrastructure behind the front line, meaning that even areas previously considered safe can now be targeted. One of the most visible examples of this shift occurred near Steppe, where Ukrainian drones reportedly destroyed 3 Russian air defense systems in a single strike. The systems, estimated to have a combined value of approximately $75 million, were eliminated using coordinated drone operations. Thermal camera footage circulated in military reports reportedly showed the moment when the air defense systems were destroyed, demonstrating the vulnerability of expensive equipment to relatively low-cost drone technology. The struggle for control of the airspace above the battlefield has also intensified. Ukrainian forces have used drones extensively for reconnaissance and attack missions, while Russian forces continue to deploy their own unmanned aerial vehicles, including kamikaze drones. In one widely discussed incident reported on February 26, helicopters from the Ukrainian Navy reportedly engaged Russian kamikaze drones in the air. According to reports circulating on social media, the helicopter crew tracked and destroyed multiple drones while attempting to protect Ukrainian positions from aerial attack. The engagement highlighted how the skies above the front line have become a constant battlefield in their own right. Meanwhile, Russian ground forces continue to face mounting logistical difficulties. Units associated with the Russian 58th Army operating in the Zaporizhia direction have reportedly begun using civilian trucks instead of armored vehicles to move supplies and personnel. Analysts attribute this change to shortages of military equipment and the ongoing destruction of supply depots. Radio communications reportedly intercepted from the area suggest that some units are experiencing severe ammunition shortages and are requesting reinforcements that have yet to arrive. The logistical problems are compounded by the ongoing Ukrainian counteroffensive in the southeastern sector, which has now entered its fourth week. Ukrainian forces report having regained several strategic settlements, including the village of Ternov. In that area, the Russian 69th Protection Brigade reportedly suffered a major defeat during fighting against the Ukrainian 425th Assault Regiment. Ukrainian sources state that control of the settlement is now firmly in Ukrainian hands. The capture of these positions has strategic implications because it threatens Russian supply routes leading toward Mariupol. If Ukrainian forces maintain control over these areas, Russia may face increasing difficulty sustaining its forces across parts of southern Ukraine. Military observers emphasize that maintaining uninterrupted supply routes is essential for any large-scale military deployment, particularly in prolonged high-intensity combat. International attention to the Zaporizhia developments has grown as the situation evolves. NATO officials and analysts at the Pentagon are reportedly monitoring Ukrainian advances closely. Some Western experts describe the speed with which Ukrainian forces regain territory in this sector as unexpected. However, Ukrainian military personnel involved in the operations say the progress is the result of careful planning carried out over several months. For Ukraine, pushing Russian forces away from the border of the Dnipropetrovsk region has both military and economic importance. The area is home to critical industrial infrastructure that supports the country's economy and defense production. Increasing the distance between Russian artillery positions and this industrial heartland reduces the threat of long-range bombardment and provides additional security for Ukrainian supply networks. At the strategic level, the developments in Zaporizhia also affect Russia's position in Crimea. Russian military planners rely on two main logistical routes to supply forces stationed in the south: railway networks and the Kerch Bridge connecting Russia to the Crimean Peninsula. Both of these routes have been targeted repeatedly by Ukrainian strikes. Analysts note that the Kerch Bridge, once considered a major strategic advantage for Russia, has increasingly become a vulnerable target due to Ukraine's growing capabilities with long-range missiles and maritime drones. Ukrainian naval drones have already forced the Russian Black Sea Fleet to limit its movements, preventing several ships from leaving their ports. Some analysts suggest that if these trends continue, control over the Sea of Azov could gradually shift, limiting Russia's operational flexibility in the region. Although such outcomes remain uncertain, the possibility is now being actively discussed in military circles. Despite these challenges, Russia continues to maintain a substantial military presence in southern Ukraine. Reinforcements are reportedly being prepared and transferred toward the region, although many of the incoming units are believed to consist of newly recruited soldiers with limited training. Analysts warn that deploying such forces directly into intense combat conditions could lead to further heavy losses. Inside Russia, reports from military correspondents and independent analysts indicate that morale among some units may be declining after repeated logistical disruptions and battlefield setbacks. However, the Kremlin has not publicly acknowledged any major defeat and continues to emphasize that Russian forces are regrouping and preparing defensive measures. For now, the Zaporizhia front remains one of the key battlegrounds that could shape the next phase of the war. Ukrainian forces have gained momentum through coordinated attacks on logistics, communication networks, and supply depots, while Russian forces are attempting to stabilize their lines and reorganize their defenses. Whether the recent Ukrainian gains will lead to further advances toward the Sea of Azov or result in a prolonged stalemate remains uncertain. The outcome will depend on several factors, including the ability of Ukrainian forces to sustain their operational tempo and the capacity of Russian command to restore supply lines and reinforce weakened sectors. What is clear at this stage is that the developments in Zaporizhia have altered the dynamics of the southern front and are likely to influence military planning on both sides in the months ahead. For continued coverage of the conflict, strategic developments, and verified battlefield updates, viewers are encouraged to subscribe and follow future reports.